Welcome to All Things in the Name of Love. If you like this show, please like, subscribe, and share. Thanks. Welcome to another episode of All Things in the Name of Love. And today I have with me Jessie Fierce Grace, which I'm definitely going to talk to you about, Torres. And she and I recently connected. And before I even pressed record, we were already like, blah, 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 blah. So I was like, oh yeah, we have time constraints. So I decided to press the recording. Among the many things Jessie is she's a top performance coach and coined the phrase fierce grace. And I know you have this epic background that led you to bring this into form, fierce grace. If you would like to talk a little bit, I don't want to like take up the whole time, but just talk a little bit about your background that brought you to this space of understanding what grace truly is.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on the show,
Oh, you're
Sophia.
welcome.
It's so wonderful to be here and speak to your audience. So part of what got me to really connect with what fierce grace is really a product of my own personal journey. Everybody has their story. Everybody has the things that they've experienced, those kind of drop to your knees moments. And so my story is, I tell it from the context of here's what was, here's what is now, and what is possible for anybody that's in any level of suffering. And fierce grace was birthed out of, honestly, a moment of survival in my journey, a moment where I was 38 years old. I'm 58 now. So, I did not have a clue who I was. I had two 17-year-olds and because they're twins, and my daughter who was 15, and our world was completely turned upside down. And I was going through a divorce, which was very tumultuous, very painful, very vulgar and mean. That turned me upside down in every way a human being could. And my journey had been of childhood abuse up to I was 18, and then my next 18, because I went from dad to husband, my next 18 years was another layer of abuse. So at 38, I'm coming out. Who am I? I have no freaking clue. I didn't even know how to leave my city. I had to buy a Thomas guide back then because I think MapQuest was just coming out. And just to drive out of my city. And so I came from so much fear and survival. I was afraid of everything. I didn't know, how am I going to do this? How am I going to survive? My entire world is turned upside down. What I knew was my family. What I knew was raising my kids. What I knew, and now I'm like, oh my God, I have to figure this out. So what showed up, and I didn't know, it was almost like I just had this sense to do this because I wasn't conscious in any way back then. I was in total survival. Is that in order for me to get through this, and not just get through it, but bring my children through it in a way that we would thrive, I had to challenge myself and put myself in things that scared me. So because I was terrified of everything, so everything was a challenge. And the more that I intentionally put things in my path to challenge me out of my fear, I found a fierceness in me that I didn't know existed, because I lived very much in a victim status, right? Victimized by my father, victimized by my ex, victimized by my own lack of self-worth. And so now coming to a place where ain't nobody got time for that. You got to freaking pick it up. You got to figure this out. You're leading your 3 light warriors over here, right? And so in that, started to put things that challenge me, and I found another level of who I was underneath, the constant, the constant way I was treated. And so fierceness showed up, that protective mama bear energy. It's different than masculine, which is one of the things I will talk about in a bit here. And pull that energy forward. And then realizing that to be in fight mode is also not who I am. Right? So like there's a pendulum swing. There's like, I was the absolute doormat to now don't you dare. You know what I mean? And that's not, neither one of those are me. I'm somewhere down here in the middle. And how do I find the aspects of me that are fierce? And how do I find the parts of me that are filled with grace and love and nurture and care? So the masculine, feminine, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and finding that happy medium, because I
Mm-hmm.
have both, but how do I harness the energy in a way that fuels my spirit and allows me to be the greatest version of me?
I love that. That is so beautiful because I've had both elements too. And I remember a few years ago, I talked to my non-physical team. I'm like, okay, how do I be more graceful? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I knew I wanted more grace. And they said, just be more graceful. And I'm like, that's not helpful. I
What does
didn't
that mean?
what I mean. I don't understand. Like, so as I've tuned in, it's just like being more present, more slow, tuning into the energy for me of Kuan Yin and her gentle nature.
Mhm.
And I know there's this, get the broadsword out kind of energy within me as well. And that has a time and place for it. But I really like that calm centeredness. And that's what draws me more and more and more the longer I practice what I don't know.
Well, good. But what's beautiful is you're seeking,
Hmm.
right? You're seeking, you're open to like that learning and that growth.
Yeah.
And I think that when we get to our center, when we find that beautiful like success FM, right,
Hmm. Hmm.
frequency, um, there's a universal intelligence that opens up.
Hmm.
There's a connection, right, to source, God, whatever you believe in, that goes beyond the wound,
Hmm.
right? So when
Hmm.
we're in authenticity, it's because we're responding from a triggered place of pain or
Hmm.
wound, that has us show up in a way that
Hmm.
is, I believe, is in our heart armor, right? It's our armored
Hmm. Hmm.
self, because hey, I did the pure thing and I was stomped on and I was hurt. Not doing that again. So
Yeah.
armor
Yeah.
throughout our journey. And then we respond from that wound, versus our true core essence.
Hmm.
And that's what I'm here to help people come back to, that purity, come back to that beauty, that innocence, because we've lost ourselves and there's so many layers of armor that we don't know. We show up this way, right,
Hmm.
based on who we're in front of. Oh, I want to find, a partner, so I'm gonna be this. Oh, I need to do my business, so I'm gonna be this, and there's
Hmm.
all these layers. But what ends up happening, it draws in imposter syndrome. It
Hmm.
draws in unworthiness, because if you do fall in love but you showed them this version, back here you're like, yeah, but if they like knew who I really was, they'd leave me,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so we're not operating from our magnificence, our core essence, which there's a
Hmm.
divinity within each of us.
Hmm.
And so it causes us to go into, sabotaging mindset or fear-based
Right.
responses,
Right.
right? So that's why we got to peel that armor off and we got to come back to our divine perfection. And in that, the second layer, it's like we armored up from the context of our pain and the things we experienced, and
Hmm.
we didn't know better. Our unconscious mind did it. But once you peel all that armor off, now you're in the purity of like who you are. It feels confronting. Just like, oh, now
Hmm.
I'm this like just wide open vessel. And so I'm not ignorant to say that there isn't darkness in the world.
Hmm.
But the difference is that now when you go out into the world, because you are raw and open, you are more susceptible to energies,
Hmm.
that now we teach you how to actually intentionally armor up
Hmm.
in a way that protects you, but you're not living from that. You're living from your truth. You've just built an energetic layer of protection around you so that you can be the purest form of you without injury.
I had an experience of that when I was up at Orcas Island where I watched The Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe. And I came from weed where we did not experience the trauma of COVID. We were
Mhm.
just normal people seeing each other, hugging each other. It was like I was in a parallel universe. And
Okay.
I show up to Orcas and they all experience COVID, like
Right.
the culture of COVID.
Hmm.
And so I'm like, hi, it's nice to meet you. And they're like, um, so I show up to this play and it's the first play they've had in 3 years. And I'm feeling the energy
Mm.
of the whole space. And like I'm getting into the compassion mode and I hear activate your Merkaba.
Mm-hmm.
Never heard that before. So I feel my Merkaba activating, and then I hear, okay, now we're going to activate your toroidal field of unconditional love so you can spread that out
Beautiful.
and you can watch the play and enjoy the play. And you're not even conscious of the fact that you're spreading love. You're just enjoying the play.
Right.
And so that's just been something that I've done since then. And it's amazing because like there are situations where I walk in and I'm like, I can feel there's this desperate need for love. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be part of like, I want to send the unconditional love. I just don't want to be affected by the need for it, if that makes
Right.
sense. Yeah.
Well, that's the beauty of that toroidal field, but most don't know that,
Hmm.
right? So in being able to go out in the world, especially now, and it's an overused term, but everybody calling themselves empaths, which, okay, yes, being empathic can be very daunting because you feel everything.
Hmm.
And if you don't understand this concept, it can make you want to recluse and
Hmm.
isolate and just go back home and hide under the covers because
Right.
ooh, it's a rough world out there. There's a lot of pain,
Hmm.
right? So what we forget is that when we feel that density, light will always trump dark.
Hmm.
Okay. Light will always trump dark. So if we look at it from light and dark, darkness can be our shadow, darkness can be our pain, our wound, right? So when you go out into the world, and this happened to me when I was working for Tony Robbins. There was a business mastery, there was a business seminar, and I was going there and I was going to meet clients. And it was after I had had my own spiritual awakening and dropping all my armor. And I felt like I walked into a boxing ring. I was like, oh, it was in Vegas. It was in
Yeah.
Vegas
Ooh,
event,
ooh.
right? So I was just like, I can't do this. And I called my mentor and I'm like, I can't do this. I want to go back to the hotel room and go into the covers, you know. And he says you need to turn up your vibration.
Mm.
And I was like, spot on. So what we don't understand is that light will always trump dark. So if we look at love as a light frequency and fear as on the omega levels of consciousness, fear is at 100, love is at 500, to give you a
Hmm.
reference.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right. So if our dial is turned to 500 and fear and wounding comes in, it's not that it wins, it's that we dim,
Right.
right? Because we're like, oh wow, that feels good. So our literally our volume goes down, and now we meet fear with fear, and we feel weighted, and we feel exhausted, and we feel like, right? So then we
Hmm.
take that home. So what you did, which is the key, is to build that toroidal field in so much love and compassion that when people's pain comes to you, that's the moment you want to amplify that
Hmm.
frequency versus you know, dim your light. You want to
Right.
have more love, more compassion in those moments, and
Hmm.
that way it doesn't penetrate.
Right. Right. And that's like it's a combination of awareness and accountability because we are ultimately accountable for how we show up in the world.
Mhm.
And to remember that we have the choice of how we want to show up.
Yeah.
That's an awareness that, once it's a habit, right? Everything's a habit. So like blessing my water before I drink it every day with unconditional love,
Yeah.
that's a habit. And I can feel the difference when I do it and when I don't do
Hmm.
it. So like
Right.
it's just bringing these different layers of, oh, we get to choose how we want to show up in the world. And we have so many tools that we just haven't been taught.
Hmm. Well, to your point, though, a lot of people think they don't have the choice.
Right.
You don't understand. I just went out and all of a sudden I felt like attacked, you know, like me. Like I'm just like, oh, this is too hard. I don't know. It feels really hard. I can't even be here.
Hmm.
Right. And so I love that you said that because it is always a choice. We
Right.
just, again, we need to find the resources, we need to find the tools, we need to find the mentor or coach to help us understand what can we do in those moments. Because if you choose to then, like you, build that toroidal field or turn up your love volume or whatever that looks like, you won't be as affected by it. But we
Hmm.
feel that we're out of control. I can't help, you know, how other people treat me. How other people treat you is your responsibility to make meaning around. right? Now, it doesn't mean we're human beings, so it doesn't mean that we won't get our feelings hurt if someone's unkind,
Right.
but it's what do we make a story around it, right? And that's where we invite the suffering,
Right.
right? I always say my mom, I love her to death. She's a freaking warrior, and she's one of my greatest teachers because she triggers me so much. But what I understand is that she's just being beautifully her.
Right.
My triggers are my responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
and that to me is a part of me that's calling for my love and attention.
Right.
Right. So that's like, oh, okay. Thank you, mom, for the lesson. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. I'm going to
Right.
go check in with that part of me that's
Right.
making a meaning that you're wrong.
Right.
Right. Or it's making a meaning that I did something wrong with
Mm-hmm.
your comment. Right.
I had that a few months ago. I was visiting. My mom has dementia, but she has moments of clarity, which is
Mhm.
amazing. And I was telling her that one of my cousins wanted me to tell her how grateful she was for giving her permission to be her.
Mm.
And I did not get that same treatment.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And so she said, "Well, honey, did I do that for you?"
Whoops.
And I said, "Well, Mom, you didn't, but you know what? That was for me to heal."
Yeah.
And because it's not her fault, she was just in
Right.
her programs and her whatever it was. But I had to look at it within me and go, okay, what is the lesson for me? What is the gift in here that's showing me that I'm behaving a certain way that isn't me?
Right.
Like it's a defense mechanism, it's a coping mechanism. What is it that is wanting to be seen that my subconscious is protecting me from seeing that I can only see when somebody presses the button of a trigger?
Exactly. But what I love about what you said is so important is that you ask the right questions, right? Our life is in direct proportion to the quality of questions we ask ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in that moment, you're like, what's the good in this?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, look, I've had many uppercuts in life. If you would have asked me when my brother was murdered, what's the good in this, Jessie? I
Mm-hmm.
probably would have punched you in the nose. um,
Yeah.
but there's always something like the over 300 people that came to his like funeral, like that I didn't know who he had touched.
Mm.
With my little brother, his daughters coming together, three of them that are different mothers that had never met each other, coming together and loving each other like
Wow.
they've been sisters their whole life, right? So in
That's
the moment
beautiful.
of my sorrow, my deepest sorrow, I'm able to witness the light in the darkest moments.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't happen if you don't ask the right question. So
Mm-hmm.
even though, because again, what happens is we go into shouldn't, like this shouldn't have happened,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like right and wrong. Is there a right and wrong, or is there just what is, right? So
Right.
I can say my brother shouldn't have been killed, but he was.
Right.
So if I say he shouldn't have, I'm creating an argument with reality,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to lose every time,
Right. Right.
right? Because it's just the reality. So how do I say it shouldn't have happened? It should have because it did. And that's what Byron Katie says, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in that, now I get to, if that was by some divine order, by my divine contract with God in the universe, then how is it here for me? What is the good in this? How could I find the light in the darkest moments of my pain? And
Mm-hmm.
that's really what I do is as I help alchemize that pain into something beautiful. How do we turn it into passion, purpose, and impact? How do we relieve ourselves from the suffering? Right? Because we're going to have pain in life. That's just the
Right.
construct of life. But when we suffer, we're actually choosing it. And I
Mm-hmm.
know for some people that's confronting because of how dare you, blah, blah, blah. This happened to me. And I totally understand. And if we don't look for the gift, we will
Mm-hmm.
only remember the pain.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with that. And I'm on this every once in a while. My ego's like, do I still have to do the spiritual journey thing? Can I have a day off? But like
I know.
this morning, I had a dream where I was shown, like I woke up from it, I was shown where frustration lies in me. And then I
Mhm.
felt a deeper layer of judgment that I didn't know I had.
Mhm.
And I was like, this is so cool because now I can see it.
Right.
And do I necessarily like the fact that I judged myself? No, but it's just there.
Right.
So how do I show up for it in a way that's more compassionate with myself and grateful for the fact that I actually see it?
Exactly. But here's what and I that's why I love that you're speaking to this on your podcast, because what society tells us and shows us is what's wrong, not what's right.
Mm-hmm.
So we're conditioned to beat ourselves up. I have this sitting on my desk because I use it in coaching all the time. And it's this beautiful judgment hammer, right? Because we're just so conditioned to beat ourselves up the minute
Mm-hmm.
we feel we've done something wrong, or we feel
Right.
sad or disempowered, or we're not hitting our goals or whatever. We
Mm-hmm.
immediately start to find what's wrong with us. That used to be my question. My
Mm-hmm.
question when things would go sideways was, what's wrong with me? Why can't I figure this
Right.
out? What's my problem? And so what that does is it invites that sabotaging voice,
Mm-hmm.
right, who's at the ready with a list of things. Oh, what's wrong with you, Jessie? Well, let me tell you. This, and this, right? And it
Right.
like, oh, so that just disempowers us more
Yeah.
and we go into suffering
Mm-hmm.
versus, what's the good in this, or what could be good about this? If you feel like it's hard to find the good, what
Mm-hmm.
could be good about this? What's the opportunity here for my growth or expansion?
Mm-hmm.
What muscle is God in the universe calling me to build in this moment? Is it
Mm-hmm.
courage? Is it deeper conviction to my purpose? Is it resilience? I don't know. But when you start to look for it, you find it and you see it as character building moments
Mm-hmm.
versus moments where God in the universe is trying to take you out. What if
Right.
it wasn't to take you out? What if
Mm-hmm.
it was there to wake you up?
Right. Right. Because that's all it is. Like anything that's a subconscious program is there for us to wake up from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, in my own journey, like the layers, I'm grateful that I've had a slow awakening because I've had a lot of stuff to clear. And so it's like, okay, this is just a deeper layer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so grateful that I've grown that much that I can feel this layer,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because
Mm-hmm.
it's, I know people that have had an immediate Kundalini awakening, and that seems traumatic.
Here's the thing, like, for everyone, it's their journey, it's their path, right? So for some, the awakening process is a little tumultuous, right? It's just like
Mm-hmm.
you see those memes where it says, I want a spiritual awakening, and then you get one that shows the kid on the roller coaster screaming, like, and spiritual guides next to them going, hey, this is fun, but here's the thing, again, I trust, right? I trust the divine
Mm-hmm.
order of it all. And
Right.
for some, it kind of comes with a freaking jackhammer.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they're so conditioned to their story that it
Mm-hmm.
had to come with a jackhammer
Mm-hmm.
because they wouldn't have moved.
Right.
They wouldn't have moved. But what I trust is that it is precisely for you,
Mm-hmm.
even though it feels like a lot of pain.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the depth of our darkness is converse to the height of our light.
Mm-hmm.
And if you start to see that in those dark moments where you feel hurt or you feel abandoned by God in the universe, or you're just like, God, one more blow, I got 10 paces forward and now I feel like I got 20 paces back. It's not. Remember, you're constantly building new threshold.
Mm-hmm.
We forget that, right? It's like when you think about your journey 20 years ago, you're over here, and then you do work and you heal and you come to this place of right here, and you're just like, so now you're moving forward and you hit a bump in the road, and
Mm-hmm.
then you fall back, but you fall back to here, not
Mm-hmm.
here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what people don't forget. And they think that they're back there, and they judge themselves like, why am I stuck again?
Right.
Why does this keep happening? Why I'm never going to freaking heal or whatever. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just like, no, I love the quote from Ram Dass that says, we're all just walking each other home.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And in that context, you are walking your journey. And what I tell people when we're in coaching, because they're so beating themselves up, it's just like, you got yourself to this threshold. So when you fall back to here. Then you're going to move over here, and then you're going to go here, and you fall back to here, and you're constantly moving. So when you're in this space, do you think you can help somebody way over here? You absolutely can,
Yeah.
because they're there and you're way over here.
Right.
So it's like you've already been there. So we're not here for the people ahead of us. We're here
Right,
for the
right,
people
right,
behind us.
right.
And when
No,
we
I
start to
definitely feel that.
acknowledge that, we can honor our journey versus beat ourselves up because we think we're not at the level. It's like my daughter, when she was like, she's 35 now, when she was 23, she was like, she wanted to help girls in middle school with body image.
Oh,
Right.
cool.
And she was in her early 20s, and she's like, but mom, I don't know if I can help them because I'm not there yet. And I'm like, Shayna, what the frick is there yet? What does that
Right,
mean? I'm
right,
not there yet. What does that,
right,
but I
right.
am further along in the journey. So I
Mm-hmm.
can help all of those. And I told her, I go, if I brought you a 13-year-old right now with body image, could you help her? And she said, well, yeah. And I'm like, then that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I've noticed in my own journey, like my awarenesses last night. So the more I've done this work, the easier it gets to transmute the behavior.
Hmm. Right.
And when I was,
Shortening that process,
yeah,
right?
when I was
Yeah.
feeling it last night, I was like, I just felt the shift. It's like I had the awareness, and then it just like the energy just like dissolved. It was like, wow, this is so amazing. Because it used to be like days and days of me torturing myself.
Exactly.
Like, I don't want to look at it, but I have to look at it, but I don't want to, but I have to, like, it just showed up and I felt it and it went away.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's the gift.
Hmm. And that's what we're here to do. Honestly, what we're doing in waking up is an overused term, but it's really bringing the unconscious to consciousness. It's
Hmm.
bringing awareness to our patterns of behavior. Because
Hmm.
once we're aware, then it kind of sits out here, and I get to watch it like a movie. I'm like, oh, there's Jessie. She's frustrated. What triggered her? And I get to kind of get curious,
Hmm.
right, as to what is causing the human, right, to have this experience. Because like in my spiritual essence, I know I'm divine perfection, my higher self knows this is all divine, blah blah blah, but
Hmm.
I'm human. So
Right.
my human is over here stuck, my human is over here feeling disappointed and sad. If I observe her and I get curious around it and I'm aware, oh, she's going to her pattern of shame. What triggered her? Let me
Hmm.
check on that. Oh, it's this thing. Oh, well, I know shame is a cosmic joke. So let's just help support her. She needs a little bit more love in that area.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so that constantly allows us to shorten the suffering process, right?
Hmm.
Where we might have ruminated for months and stayed stuck and gone
Right.
backward, right? Now we're just like, ooh, I can now see, okay, that's what got her there. Okay, now let's give her some resources and some love to help pull her out. So we
Hmm.
shorten that. But that's the thing that people don't celebrate. So I'm
Right.
glad you brought that up. They don't celebrate, hey, before I would have suffered for weeks. This
Right.
time I suffered for 2 days. Okay, that's way better.
Yeah.
I even tell people, like, give permission to your human to be angry, to be like, just
Hmm.
put a clock on it. Like, right? If you're mad at something, put a clock on it, say, you know what? I'm going to choose, because again, it's a choice. We're all
Hmm.
sovereign here.
Hmm.
I'm going to choose to be mad about this particular thing for a whole day. I'm going to give
Hmm.
myself permission to just be mad. Cool. Put a clock on it for the whole day. You got to be mad, kick, scream, yell obscenities, whatever you freaking need. Right. And when you do that and you consciously give yourself permission, you
Hmm.
find that it kind of sucks. Feels good for a little bit. And then
Yep.
you're like, yeah, I don't want to freaking live in that energy anymore. Or like,
Hmm.
you give yourself 24 hours. The next thing you know, you're like, I'm done in 30 minutes,
Hmm.
or I'm done in 5, because it's like when you intentionally give yourself permission. But I do believe we have to give ourselves permission.
Oh yeah,
And
definitely.
bypass the human having the experience of
Right.
disappointment, sadness, anger, rage. When my brother was killed last year, like, I felt rage. I
Oh
felt
yeah.
anger, and that's not my go-to. My go-to
Hmm.
emotion is usually sadness. But in that moment, I was like, no, like there was so many plans that we had, so many
Mm.
things that we talked about, speaking on stages together, because I told him, I go, look, no matter what you've been through, and he had been in a lot of trouble since my older brother was killed. Um, and I said, here's the thing, like I could talk to a young adult man who's about to make a crappy decision, and he won't hear me like he'll hear you.
Mhm, mhm.
Right. So, like, there's room here, and we're going to talk on stages together, and you're going to watch, and you're going to see that your journey has not been in vain. It's been
Right.
for a reason. So, when
Mhm,
this happened, it was a freaking
mhm.
uppercut. I was like, no. So, I felt rage in my body. So, I had to
Yeah.
give myself permission to feel that,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that it wasn't going to be healthy for me to live there.
Right.
But
Right.
I'm not going to bypass the
Mm-hmm.
anger I felt, because then
Mm-hmm.
what happens is it lives in my body
Right.
and it shows up as fibromyalgia or freaking cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a learning that this human experience is a learning of how to navigate life's challenges, what
Mm-hmm.
meaning we give it, the choice of suffering or not, and bringing awareness to our patterns and behavior.
Mm-hmm. Mm. That is so succinctly and beautifully said.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And it's so true because like we signed up for all the things, right?
Exactly.
We chose our families, we chose the dynamics, we chose all of the patterns we came here to heal. And we're not the only ones who signed up for these.
Exactly.
So like one of the gifts I've been able to master is codependency, because boy, did it run deep in my family. And I've just seen the different layers of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so beautiful because now I know exactly what it is for me. And I can bring awareness to others as I see it. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh no, that's actually, yeah, yeah, narcissism, no, go gaslighting, that's not a good thing. Um, and I'm sure there's other layers I can look at, but I also know how far I've come from where I grew up with.
Right.
Like my parents love them to pieces. Wow. Like that was super unhealthy to grow up with. And I chose it.
Right. Yeah, if we look at our life like that, and I coached business owners that were trying to get their online businesses out into the world, and they come in with this beautiful desire to serve, and then they get freaked out, right? Oh, I don't know how to do this, and oh my God, it's so much responsibility, and I need to deliver, blah blah blah. And I'm like, look, they shared with me their story, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what if you like signed a contract with God before you came here, and you decided that as you did, you were going to come in here in this world, and God said, okay, you want to come to earth, great, what do you want to experience life as?
Mhm,
Oh, you want to experience it as forgiveness, awesome. Well, if you're going to experience life as forgiveness, you're going to need something to forgive.
mhm,
So then another little soul signs up and says, I'll be that for you,
mhm,
right? And you're like, well, why? Right? Like, this is a story actually Neil Donald Walsh wrote in a little children's book called The Little Soul in the Sun.
mm,
And the child says, why would you do that for me? Like, your light is so beautiful. And she's like, well, because I love you. However, I have an
mm,
ask. And he's like, okay, great. And she's like, well, I'm going to be so good at helping you find forgiveness that I might forget how bright my light is. And I'm going to need you to remember. And
mm.
so he's like, okay, you got it. And then another little soul and another little soul. And they all came here together
I
to
love
help that
that.
one soul find forgiveness,
That
right?
is, oh wow.
If we start to see our journey that way, we can fall in love with all of the adversity, all of the people,
Mhm,
our parents, our bosses, our exes. Like I feel in total gratitude for all of my journey, and my mom, when she still suffers and blames herself for not knowing and not seeing, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, Mom, I'm good.
mhm.
Like, I wouldn't change my past because I wouldn't be me.
Right.
And I wouldn't have this conviction and this desire to help people out of suffering. I'd be a
Mhm.
different person, and I don't want to be that. I like who I am.
Right.
So
Right.
please don't suffer on my behalf because I'm good. But again, it's like we start to see the divine choreography of all of it.
Mhm.
And every person that comes in, that's why when I say like heal our traumas, if we don't, like, I believe that we're knowing our way out of healing,
Mhm.
because we have all the information now. We have all of the seminars and the workshops and the books, and we're not doing the healing. If we don't heal, that thing is going to show up in a boss or a partner or a friend,
Mhm.
or like, the lesson is there for you to heal from.
Mhm.
And if you don't if you bypass the healing, then you're going to continue to repeat that pattern, and more people are going to show up in disguise to show you the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Living in shame for me, it's so sneaky. Like, I didn't know that what I brought from my home, my childhood home, I brought into my office space. And
Mm.
the characters were different. My dad showed up in a woman, and like all of that. But when I stood back and I looked at it, I was like, oh my God, because I found myself trying to convince my worthiness, trying to find validation. And I had this total surreal, like I call it, you sit in the cosmic seat. The cosmic seat is when you kind of just sit outside and you're watching yourself like a
Mm-hmm.
movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this whole like visceral experience when I was trying so madly to convince this lady she was kind of like a boss. I mean, I was an independent contractor, but I was being guided under her,
Mm-hmm.
and she kept blocking me and blocking me and blocking me, and I was trying to convince her, like, what is the problem? I just want to help. And I had this cosmic moment. I stepped out and I was like, what are you doing? Like, do you know who you are? This is what my higher self, whatever it
Oh,
was.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and I was like, oh. And I just stopped the argument, and I was like, oh my God, she's representing my father. This person's representing. And I was like, I brought that shame pattern into this arena, and all
Mhm.
of me was trying to convince my worthiness to this group. That's how sneaky it is. So
That's beautiful.
we don't know what we don't know, and that's why
Hmm.
we do what we do, right? It's like my
Yeah.
my path is to help you unpack that. If there's any limitation in you, if there's a part of you that feels like there's another level to your life, but you don't know how to get it, you almost feel guilty because you want it, but your life isn't terrible, but there's something
Yeah,
missing,
yeah, yeah.
and you can't see it, but you feel limited. There's something else that's wanting to be birthed, and you just can't grasp it. It's because there's something in the unconscious conditioning of our journey
Mm.
that's stopping you. I don't believe there's any limitation to the human being. There's only the
Mm-mm.
belief there is one. But
Mm-hmm,
we don't
mm-hmm.
know what we don't know. A lot of us think, oh no, I forgave my parents. No, no, I don't care anymore. It doesn't bother me.
Right.
That doesn't mean that the child in the unconscious conditioning wrote a story around it and
Mm-hmm.
is now the very thing that's preventing you. And I'll give you a
Mm-hmm.
quick example, because when I talk about trauma, sometimes people think that it's got to be some rape or something gigantic. And again, of course, that's traumatic, but trauma is just what the child created meaning around.
Mm-hmm.
As an example, a child who is 5 years old and goes to the grocery store with his mother, right? And he's playing with toys in the aisle. She walks up to the end of the aisle to grab something. She can see him, but he can't see her, right? He lifts his
Mm-hmm.
head up. She's like, Mom. And for those 10 seconds that she's like, I'm right here, he anchors abandonment. He anchors, I was
Mm-hmm.
left alone. And the next time she goes to the grocery store, he's a little bit more clingy and doesn't want her to get away. Right now, he's 35 years old, wonders why he keeps losing girlfriends, because he's controlling, he's insecure, he's jealous, because that little boy is afraid that he'll be
Mm-hmm.
left behind.
Mm.
Right? So that's the journey of the human experience. And we don't know how to see those things unless you have a guide that can
Right.
help you unpack what are the limitations, and let's see where that moment, that thread of your journey created that meaning, so that
Mm-hmm.
we can pull it out and we can start to see through a different set of lenses. I want to help you see the unseen so that you never unsee it. Because once you recognize the magnificence of why that moment was planted in your journey, and you start to see the beautiful child that got back up, you can't unsee that. So you'll
Mm-hmm.
never see your past pain as something that was injury. You'll see the beautiful soul that got back up and continue to be kind, continue to persevere, continue to be who you are today. And now you start to create a new pathway for your mind to go when challenges come, because you
Mm-hmm.
can't unsee that anymore. You're like, well, no, I was resilient back then, right? Like when
Mm-hmm.
I was little and I was building traps, because I would build traps to warn me when my dad was sneaking into my room. I can look at that and say, wow, that really sucks that a little girl had to build traps to warn her when her father was coming into her room. It didn't really stop him, but somehow it made me feel better. But I can think of that little girl and I see her as creative and
Mm-hmm.
resourceful And, she created a plan and she thought this would work, like, because that's also true.
Mm-hmm.
One brings me sadness and makes me feel sorry for her, and the
Yep.
other one allows me to see her beauty.
Yeah.
Both are available, but we're
Mm-hmm.
not taught to seek the other side.
Mm-hmm. Mm. I want to talk to you for hours. I'm so sad that like we're already running close to the end because of your time constraints. So I'm
Yeah,
going to ask you one final question for now, because I definitely want to have more conversations with you. Uh,
absolutely.
how do people find you?
How do people find me? Well, I will definitely give you all the links for your show notes. And
Perfect.
I also have a little gift, a giveaway for your audience. It's called the 10-Step Guide to Freedom. And no matter what your situation is right now, read these steps and you can start to take action. Sometimes when we're in our pain, we don't see a way out. I remember for me, the only way out when I was at my worst was dying. I was very apathetic and I just wanted somebody to blow the red light so I could be done, because that was the only way I saw out of my pain.
Mm-hmm.
So I built these 10 steps so that you can start to activate ways to get out of your situation, even if it's just even in your emotional state or your emotional home. And you can visit me at unshakeablelife.com or healandgrowrich.org.
Mm.
Okay, those are two places that you can contact me. You can call me. Let's book a call. Let's see, where you're at and how I can best support you. The call's 100% free. And let's see if there's a way to get you out of the suffering that you're in right now, so that you can be amongst the light warriors that we're putting out in the world to help serve others, because your one act of kindness can change the trajectory of someone's life, because that's what woke me up. And the people that treated me kind will never know who they woke up.
Mm-hmm.
So don't underestimate the power of your love.
Jessie, I don't even have words to express how grateful I am to know you
Oh,
and the gift of having this time with you. I'm so, so grateful that you took time out to connect with me and to share your gifts with
likewise.
the world. So grateful.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome.